So many of you know that Pastor Steve offers a lay witness class multiple times throughout the year. These classes are to help us tell our stories in a way that glorifies God and lifts us up to one another. It's a way of hearing how God is moving and growing and transforming our lives. When we share our stories with one another, it is an opportunity to see God's love in a different light or in a different way than maybe our own story has shown us. And so we are privileged today to be able to hear from one of those lay witnesses. Our very own Willo Harris will be sharing in just a few moments her own personal story of her walk and journey of faith and God's love in her life. And so before we begin that, though, she has requested that we take a moment to prepare our hearts to receive that message by listening to a song. And so Adam is going to play and sing for us, and I hope you will just quiet your spirits and listen to the words of this song and ask God to open your heart to receive his anointed message through Willo Harris. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. My name is Willo Jean. I was named after my mother's roommate in college. She never asked where her unusual name came from, but somehow I ended up with her name, Willo Jean. Only one W, no W at the end. When I was a little girl, I knew what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do in life. I was preschool age when I decided I had to be a mom. And when I was 7, I decided to be a kindergarten teacher. When my friends and I played with our baby dolls, they dreamed of becoming a mommy. I dreamed of being a mommy. While they talked about doctors and hospitals and nurses, I just rocked my babies, talked to them, changed their clothes, and nurtured them to the best of my ability. This turned out to be foreshadowing of my future. I grew up in a very small church, the only church in my little town in Iowa. I remember loving Sunday school after I got over the disappointment of the New Testament not being all that new. I loved reading the Bible, and the one presented to me when I was in third grade, I still have that. I loved the stories of Joseph in the coat of many colors, and Jonah and the great fish, and Jesus with all the little children gathered around his knees. I loved that Jesus loved me in my childish sort of understanding. I trusted that he knew what was right for my life and that he had a plan. I knew God knew my name, Willo Jean. When I was 13, I can't believe that I'm getting this choked up. When I was 13, I developed a medical condition called psoriasis vulgaris. It's a pretty awful name, psoriasis vulgaris. It's an aggressive, unsightly, and painful skin disorder which is not contagious. I was called many awful names because of this condition, but those names were not from God and they didn't stick. I was rejected by classmates. My graduating class only had 28 kids, and I never had a date with a guy from my school. It was a painful and lonely time for me. People say your high school years are your best years. Not for me. Just before turning 18, I was badly burned during a skin treatment. Because of this very painful situation, I had to change all my plans and leave my childhood home in Iowa and attend college in the warmer climate of Arizona. I was leaving behind my parents and grandparents and my siblings, which was so difficult. My new name at that time was Lost. I was totally lost when I arrived at Arizona State University. I knew no one. It was another painful, lonely time. I searched out a church on campus and slowly became connected. Throughout my college years, I sometimes read my Bible. I attended study groups and was encouraged in my relationship with Jesus. I was accepted by the college group in spite of my medical condition. There was even a man who wanted to marry me, knowing about my condition. I was told after I had married and moved to Lemoore that I should not bear children to protect a child from the difficulties I had endured in those years. Hospitalizations, powerful meds, and great physical pain would not be passed on to an innocent child. I was an active Christian, and I believed that God was in control. I was at peace with that news because I had prayed, and I knew there were other options to becoming a mom. My family always said, where there's a willow, there's a way. My husband at that time was not a believer and did not accept that God was in control. To some, it may have seemed like the door was closed, but for me, it was a door wide open. We started adoption proceedings, and for 2 years of waiting, he seemed to be willing to not put forward his best for the adoption agency, seemingly sabotaging the process. A woman I knew sent me a letter telling me that probably God didn't want me to be a mom. A pastor's wife told me I was cheating God by not allowing him to use my body to make a baby. I was even informed that I should stop this adoption pursuit because there was no way I could love a child that was not my biological child. Although those statements stabbed at my heart, I refused to believe those negative thoughts. My favorite verse at the time was Jeremiah 29:11-13. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I never questioned that God had a plan for me and continued praying. It seemed that my new name was Longing. I continued to study the Bible at my church in Lemoore. The ladies in the Bible study group prayed for me, supported me, and even gave me a baby shower before I knew for certain a baby was on the way. I prayed for the young woman who would be carrying my baby and honored her role without knowing her name or her circumstances. I knew that no one comes to adoption but through pain. My family was very encouraging. I was so hopeful that there would be a baby. There were lots of changes in my prayer life. I had started out praying, so God, I want a baby. I guess I thought God's plan was all about me. Then I changed my prayer to God, I know you want me to have a baby. As my prayers continued to evolve, Jesus was shaping me for what was to come. I was asked to teach a Lenten study for my church dealing with Jesus' last trip to Jerusalem. The topic was on prayer, and I was very confident about teaching that lesson. After all, I had been very busy praying. The only thing missing was telling God what due date I wanted. I read once that sometimes God doesn't change your situation because he is on a mission to change your heart. Now I can see that he was clearly on a mission to change my heart. There was a new Christian attending this class on prayer. Her name was Buffy. Buffy took me aside after the lessons and said, "Willo, I don't think you've ever turned the adoption concerns over to the Lord." Well, I was quite surprised with that statement. After all, what did Buffy know? Of course, I had turned it over to Jesus. Hadn't I been praying for years about this? I tossed and I turned that night and told God just how wrong Buffy was. And then he showed me just how right she was. It was humbling. I cried, I tossed and turned, I paced the floor. I cried some more. How had I not seen that I was putting this biggest issue in my life on a yo-yo string? Here, God, you take it. Okay, God, give it back to me because you're not working fast enough. I'll work on it a while. God, I'm making a mess of this. You take it. So, God, this isn't working fast enough. I'll take it back. Do you recognize this pattern in your life? The next morning, I, Willo Jean, got down on my knees beside my bed and turned it over to him. I thanked God for placing Buffy in my life and began to examine my prayer life, my motives, and my heart. I promised my Heavenly Father that if he blessed me with a baby, I would be the best mommy I could possibly be. That I would be sure that this little one would be loved and raised in the church and would hear the name of Jesus from the first day in my arms and in my heart. I also promised that if he didn't have baby plans for me, that I would continue working with other people's children in my teaching career, and I would put everything I had into being the best I could. I ended my prayer by turning over my adoption dream once and for all into his hands, and I believed. I stopped calling the adoption agency, but I still believed that God would provide. I still prayed for a baby. I prayed for the young woman who was carrying my baby. I prayed for her health and her state of mind. 2.5 weeks later, my pastor called me at work. My pastor never called me at work. He informed me that he had a contact on a baby. The story went like this. It just so happened that day that a young woman who needed to place her baby up for adoption walked into the doctor's office crying. She needed to find a home for her baby immediately. Her sister had backed out of taking the baby because of the possibility of the dad's ethnicity. She wasn't quite sure on that detail or many other things. It just so happened that there was a substitute called into the doctor's office that morning because the staff was shorthanded. It just so happened that that substitute was from my church, and she overheard the entire conversation and told the doctor that she knew of a family that was prepared at a moment's notice to be placed with a baby. It just so happened that the doctors listened and took down the pastor's name and number, and he made that call. Romans 8:28 tells us, "And we know all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose." Things were indeed coming together. It appeared that the door was opening wide. My new prayer was that the words that came from my husband's mouth would reveal God's plan to us. You may recall he was not a believer. I prayed for God to fling that door wide open or slam it shut. These are the beautiful words that he said. Let's go for it. Remember I mentioned that sometimes God changes our names? Well, 2.5 weeks later, he did just that. God changed my name to Mommy. The most perfect, the most adorable baby girl was placed in my arms 13 hours after she arrived. Here was a tangible answer to my prayers and dreams. I thought the world practically stood still at this wonderful event. Actually, the world moved. I brought Erica Dawn home from the hospital the day of the Kalinga earthquake. I was finally a mother. No pregnancy, just a baby to rock and talk to and nurture, just as I had imagined as a child. And I began immediately to share the name of Jesus. Now I knew that more than ever, I would need Jesus on a daily basis to seek his will for my little family, to be sure that this precious bundle would grow to be a woman of faith, serving him. As I prayed for my newborn, I also prayed for the young man who would one day be her husband, that he would be a fine man who loved the Lord. Trouble surfaced when Erica was 4 months old. The adoption was to be finalized at 6 months, and everything had gone so smoothly. Our attorney called and said the birth father had decided he wanted to take back the baby. Of course, we didn't know exactly who the birth father was. I was horrified at the idea of losing my baby, angered that he hadn't made any mention of this sooner, and I could barely eat or sleep because of my fears. I cried a lot, cuddled that little girl so close, and prayed for God's will for my family. I prayed for his protection for this precious baby. I prayed that he would slam the door shut or fling it wide open so we would know beyond a doubt what he had planned for us. Deuteronomy 13:4 says, "You shall follow the Lord your God and fear him, and you shall keep his commandments. Listen to his voice, serve him, and cling to him." Believe me, I was clinging. And trusting in anything was difficult right then. When we went to court, we saw a man claim that he could provide a good home for this baby he had never seen. It was scary. I was terrified that this stranger might be taking away my baby, the one who smiled the sweetest, toothless smiles, wiggled with delight when she saw me each morning, and cooed as I sang to her about Jesus and his love for her, and had her fingers firmly entwined around my heart. We had to wait on the system to work, but waiting may be a time when we have to be still long enough for God to really work on us. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me when he heard me cry. Psalm 40, verse 1. Several weeks of being in God's waiting room, trying to remember Psalm 37:7, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently on him." We were ready to go back to court to establish our case for parenting. As we were walking out the door, the attorney called. The birth father's rights had been terminated because of questionable statements he had made to officials. Jesus had protected Erica with a resounding no to the man's claim and a joy-filled yes to us. Once again, he threw that door wide open for us. Erica Dawn was bright and beautiful and the joy of my life. Her dad was in the military and spent a great deal of time away. Erica and I were closely bonded. When she was 2, she saw her friend dance in a recital. And at age 3, she began dancing and told me that she felt the music inside her. Wow, was this mommy ever amazed. At age 4, Erica told me that God has rainbow eyes, for all the different people. At age 5, she began asking me how Jesus could get inside her heart. When she was 11, her dad left us, and the bond between us continued to grow. I found out that my name had once again changed from Mrs. to Ms., and from my married name back to my maiden name, with the word divorcee tacked on the end. Erica continued to dance and even won a scholarship to study dance one summer in New York. Her faith continued to grow, and she loved studying her Bible. In the meantime, my walk with Jesus was intensifying. I finally understood the consequences of being unequally yoked. We changed churches and came here to VUMC, where we were both able to thrive in a Christ-centered environment. I began Bible studies with other women, disciple classes with men and women, and found myself supported in a huge circle of prayer warriors. My faith grew in leaps and bounds. Then Erica left college for San Diego, studying dance, of course. She even won a scholarship to study dance in London. That's when Jesus placed a God-fearing man in my life, and my name changed again from Ms. to Mrs. Mike Harris. In fact, today is our 12th anniversary. Mike has encouraged my growing faith, and we are closely linked in our service to the Lord. I also gained 2 adult stepkids in my family to love. Erica met and married the godly young man I had prayed for so many years before. My life has been shaped by God himself. Has my life been perfect and easy? No. The health issues with the psoriasis vulgaris continue, along with the arthritis that comes along with it and age. Dealing with the bitterness and loss from a divorce is never easy. Raising a child as a single working mom with custody issues is challenging. A necessary change of churches is unsettling. And sending my baby 300 miles away to college in San Diego the day after 9/11 was scary. And dealing with a blended family has its struggles. And yet, as I reflect back on these years, I can see how Jesus has walked with me and carried me, and sometimes let me walk on my own a little ways before he carried me again. I can see how my Christian walk has been shaped by the people who God has placed in my path, through Bible studies I have done, and through being in church with you. And I can see how God has changed my name and my life over and over to bring me to where I am today. The reason I tell my story is not because I am perfect in my relationship with Jesus, but to give him the glory for what he has brought me through in my life. It is the desire of my heart to serve our great God. Through my experiences, I have been able to sit with an adoptive mom on the night before she had to return her little boy to his birth mother. I coordinated the Extend the Table program at our church for a while. It is my privilege to work on the prayer chain at our church, and to be a member of the hospital visitation team, where I have prayed with some of you when you have been in the hospital. I have become very involved with the Walk to Emmaus, which has increased my enthusiasm for serving and has expanded my faith tremendously. It is joy enough for me to know that my name is written in the book of life. Yes, my name is written in the book of life. How wonderful that he knows my name and wants me to be in heaven with him. But now, God has changed my name again. Yes, I am still Willo, with only one W. Yes, I am mom, I am wife, I am stepmom, and you've probably guessed it. Now my heart is full to overflowing because God has given me another new name, Grandma. That was Judah, and there's Novalee. The next one is Matthew, and the next one is Lane, and there will be a new one in September. What I have learned through this journey is that I am certain I have not received my final name. I'm excited to see what he will choose. You too have a story, and you can be sure that God has a new name for you as well. Amen.